Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back to the show. I am joined today with the co-director of March for Life, Isabel Vaughan Spruce. You may know her a little bit better these days because she's won a kind of legal battle after being arrested a couple of times for silently praying in her head on the street outside an abortion clinic. There's video footage all over online about it.
What are you here for today?
Physically, I'm just standing here.
Okay. Why here of all places? I know you don't live nearby.
But this is an abortion centre.
Okay, that's why you're stood. Is you standing here part of the protest?
No, I'm not protesting.
Are you praying?
I might be praying in my head out loud.
So I'll ask you once more, will you voluntarily come with us now to the police station for me to ask you some questions about today and other days where there are allegations that you've broken public space protection?
If I've got a choice, then no.
Okay, well then you're under arrest on suspicion of failing to comply with the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014. Now, of course, you again, you do not have to say anything. You may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something which you later on in court, anything you do say may be given.
But apart from that, we also wanted to discuss what's happening with this year's March for Life, but also what's our role to play in this, what we would definitely say is a spiritual battle for the unborn, for the protection of life, the sanctity of life. And first of all, I just want to say welcome on, Isabel. Thank you for taking the time to come on and accepting the invitation. How are you?
I'm great, and it's great to be on. So thanks very much for having me, Mark.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I know we've met a couple of times now through a few mutual friends. So it seems to be so much happening in the West Midlands. There actually is a real powerhouse of faith that I'm discovering down here over the last few years. And your story is definitely an exception for sure. You're taking on, or you have been taking on quite a lot for your witness of pro-life, for faith. You might just tell the people that might not know that exactly what it is that's been happening. You've been popping up on the news in the recent weeks. What's the story behind all that?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should mention that about the Midlands being a bit of a powerhouse, because interestingly, of course, the Midlands in Birmingham, that was where abortion started in the UK. Many people have heard of BPAS, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. Originally, it was the Birmingham Pregnancy Advisory Service. And here in Birmingham was where the first abortion centre actually opened. And that was where I used to pray outside, which was Calthorpe Clinic. But after over about 50 years of heavy business, about 10,000 abortions a year, they closed at the end of 2019. And actually, the manageress came out on the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the 12th of December and announced its closure. So we felt there was a real kind of spiritual element, unsurprisingly, to that. And then in 2020, we moved to a new abortion centre. Well, new to us, it had been going for decades, a little bit further away in Birmingham, called the Robert Clinic. And this abortion centre, we found quite a different atmosphere to what we had been experiencing previously. There was quite a lot of aggression towards us, not by people using the abortion centre, but by some of the volunteers. I mean, not by some of the locals, the residents, aimed at us, the volunteers. And although some people in the neighbourhood were really great and welcomed us and offered us cups of tea and things like that, there was a group there that were really sort of making it their mission to target us, and we were spat at and sworn at, and some people were even physically assaulted. It was very unpleasant. We would ask the police to help, and the police, even though we'd caught stuff on camera, they would say to us, well, if you don't want to be assaulted, you don't have to come out of your house, do you? So they really were, it was two-tier policing. They would, if the abortion centre called them, they would be there straight away, even though we were just, saying our prayers and offering help. But towards us, they wouldn't offer any help at all. And in September of 2022, what was called a PSPO was brought in. So that's a public space protection order, which creates like a buffer zone around the abortion centre where certain activities are banned. And I should just say, because some people are a bit confused about this, it doesn't ban people. It's not like a restraining order. It bans behaviour, certain behaviour. And one of those forms of behaviour is protesting. Well, I've never protested outside abortion centres. I go there to offer help and I go there to pray. I don't go there to protest. So even though my 40 Days for Life campaign went outside the buffer zone, I decided that I could at least silently pray inside the buffer zone. So that's what I did. And in December 2022, I was arrested. The police came and asked me, what was I doing? And I said, well, I might be praying in my head, but nothing out loud. So I hadn't even admitted to praying. I just said I might be. But that was enough for them to arrest me, locked me in a cell for quite a while, questioned me under caution. And eventually I went to court, and I was completely acquitted in court alongside Father Sean Goff, who'd been taken there for similar charges. But 2 weeks later, after being acquitted, I was rearrested again. So this time 6 police officers came in a police van, and they quite specifically told me that my prayers were an offence, even though, again, it was just silent prayers. I wasn't interacting with anyone, no posters, no leaflets, nothing like that. In a way, I wasn't even manifesting my prayers. It's not like I was, holding rosary beads in my hand or with a Bible or anything like that. So after 6 months, they dropped that and said that they weren't going any further with that case. But even after that, I was continued to be given, tickets by various, police officers, and the council would come out and give me tickets. So that was when I decided that, I needed to make a claim against the police, because it was harassment. They were the ones intimidating me. How ironic was that, since I'd been accused of intimidating service users, even though the abortion centre was closed when I was accused of that. There were no service users to intimidate. But as you mentioned, I finally received a payout from the police, which I hope is the end of the story, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, let's hope it is, but I did see online, whether it's true or not, that, well, the next thing, because obviously this has went into the national news. I saw you popping up once or twice, and then it's like, well, what's the next thing they're going to try and do then? Because if the courts are ruling that it's legal for you to silently pray in your head, standing wherever you are, including outside an abortion clinic, then why do the police keep coming? They're supposed to uphold the law. Twice it's went to the court saying this is the law, this is what's legal. It's okay for you to pray there silently. And therefore it's like, well, the next thing I'm seeing online is they're going to try and ban silent prayer obviously for that reason. So something's stirring up when you've got the attention of Parliament, the politicians. Is there any truth to that there might be something in the wind about trying to bring this about? Do you know?
Yeah, and I think you've picked up on something there. The fact that, even after it had gone to court and I'd been cleared in court, the police still come back. It shows we've got a problem here with how the police are enforcing law. That it's not just that they're helping to uphold the law, which is what they should be. They're actually trying to create the law in their own heads, formed by their own ideology, which of course is not, a professional way to behave. They're the ones deciding whether they do or don't like somebody's behaviour, or even their thoughts, and are acting on that, rather than thinking, well, what actually is the law? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I know lots of people have complained, in the UK recently about different forms of two-tier policing. Well, pro-lifers have experienced that for quite a long time now, but it just hasn't been picked up on by many people. But as you stated, we've got buffer zones due to come in around abortion centres all over the country, and that's imminent. And we'll have to wait and see as to what they're going to try and enforce with that. Clearly, if they try and enforce silent prayer, then that's our basic human right that they're trying to take away. And I've had people who have very different views to me from a religious perspective, very different views, from a pro-life perspective. They wouldn't say that they're pro-life, they support abortion, but they're rightly recognising that this is a really worrying situation, that anyone should even want to criminalise silent prayer. Prayer's never a weapon, because prayer can't cause harm. Prayer can only be for good. So that you should try and criminalize that, especially when it's not even anything out loud, just simply in somebody's head. I mean, when I'm outside the abortion centre praying, I see people stopping in the street around me all the time. So people are sometimes, just stopping to have a cigarette, waiting for a girlfriend who's having an abortion, waiting for a taxi, just stopping to have a chat or look at their phone. And nobody comes up to them and says to them, what have you stopped for? What's going on in your head? Are you praying? What are you thinking about? So clearly it's discrimination against those who are pro-life or those who are Christian to even be questioned along that line when I'm doing no more or less than anyone else who's stood in the street. So as I say, we've really got a problem with discrimination against Christians, and I know other Christians who've become quite concerned about this too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 39 years of age, and I used to say, even by the time I was 35, split my age into half. The first 17 years, the second half of my life, the other 17 years. And I saw as a young teenager, when the time the Labour government came in with Tony Blair, that's when I really started taking notice of politics a little bit in that young age. But everything that was Christian or Catholic was seemed to be offensive. Wearing your crucifix in public, people getting told to remove it in places of work, having it being removed from public spaces. The Gideon Bibles at one point were taken away from hotels or even the hospitals, I remember reading. And then Tony Blair becomes a Catholic years later, but he has to abdicate the Prime Minister first. But then a week later, I saw in the newspaper that he was bringing in his argument with his wife about why the Catholic Church needs to change its teaching on contraception. And it's like, surprise, surprise, like we never knew something was coming as soon as he became a Catholic. Where does the bishops and the priests settle with that idea, knowing that who they're letting in with that mentality and that influence that he still has? And since the Davos Prime Minister Starmer, as I call him, is now in place, I'm seeing Tony Blair talking more than he's done in the last 10 plus years. I was like, who's running the party here? But here we see, I find it is worrying for this way of tyranny. We're seeing people going to jail for 2 or 3 years for just sharing Facebook posts or social media posts for maybe a different reason. But it still goes back to this tier system. They have an agenda that needs to be put through, and then they have this what seems to be against them. And I think what shows it's more against the grain is the Christian faith, at least our Christian faith. But what about Islam? What about Hinduism and Sikhs? I mean, even from a culture point of view, let alone a religious point of view, surely life is seen as sacred by all. From like, I mean, you see the family focus with so many other different faith communities and cultures. Do you ever find that in your work or in your experience? Are you finding support or camaraderie from any other different faith groups or communities? How does that work? Because if they started to come and pray silently, are they also going to be getting the same treatment as the Christian pro-lifers?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Mark. I mean, I know we've certainly approached the Muslim community to ask them to come and join us with our 40 Days for Life campaign when we've been praying outside or near the abortion centre. I remember we spoke to a local imam and had a meeting with him to try and encourage them to come. And sadly, the response we got was, "It's not our girls that go there." Well, they need to come there because they will see quite definitely it's their girls, and it's because of an
Really?
attitude like that that their girls often come there, because it's just such a stigma of shame in their community if they get pregnant in a difficult situation, that for them they think it's better to have an abortion than to kind of carry that shame. So I think we also have a problem. I know sometimes there's a bit of a kind of grey area in some of the Muslim teaching to do with when ensoulment happens and things like that. So we see some Muslims that we meet outside the abortion centre who will be making sort of excuses as to why, if it's early on, they can have an abortion. But I should also say that I do remember a time, I think it was the first 40 Days for Life campaign that we did. Towards the end of the campaign, it was when some of the seminarians from the local Oscott College were praying outside the abortion centre. And a young man stopped in his car, a Muslim man, and he got out of the car and he opened his boot. And they were actually feeling a little bit anxious, they said to me, is what he was going to get out of his boot. And he brought out the hugest box of chocolates I have ever seen in my life. And he came over to them and he said, "We're not praying here with you, but I want you to know we're praying, in solidarity, even though we're not physically with you." So there obviously are some who support our perspective, but getting them out onto the streets with us, I don't think that's going to happen, because I think that there's just too much sort of stigma around it for them. But I just want to pick up on something that you said, Mark. You were just saying how, You felt this was something that's been happening for quite a long time. It's been brewing. You've been looking at the politics and Christianity being attacked for quite a few years. And I think one of the problems that we've really got is that for a long time, Christians have almost tried to compromise with evil. We haven't really stood up for our faith as we should have. I know sometimes people, even more recently, said to me things like, well, why don't you just move further away from the abortion centre? Why don't you just go outside the buffer zone? And, if that's what they want, does it really make that much difference to you? And of course, the group that we have got who's praying outside the buffer zone, they're still targeted by those people who targeted them before. So they're still spat at and sworn at and had their property stolen and assaulted and the rest of it. Because evil is never satisfied. And I think we need to be really aware of that. We can't just make a compromise and think, oh, well, if we move a bit further away, then they'll be happy. Maybe for the first week they won't say anything. But trust me, they won't be happy because they're not happy with any goodness existing at all. So these people outside the buffer zone have been told to move elsewhere. I even saw comments online saying that the church they're praying outside of needs to move. How intolerant is that? So I think we need to recognize that we need to kind of stand firm right from the first moment. We can't just, we can't give an inch to evil. We can't compromise with it.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not suggesting that we're rude or offensive to people. We need to be very charitable towards those who maybe don't understand our perspective or who have quite contrary perspectives. But at the same time, we can't compromise to them because that's not how evil works, And I think that's kind of part of the problem that's got us into this situation.
Yeah, I think you use that key word compromise because without going off too much of a tangent, this channel has covered a lot of faith-based topics, especially recently in the past year. A lot I've put in to like the Marian apparitions, Catholic prophecies, seen a lot that's actually emerging for these times. And the big prophecy of Akita, which was taken as worthy of belief with then Joseph Ratzinger, who we know better as Pope Benedict XVI. The Akita prophecy spoke about great division within the church, with cardinals against cardinals, bishops against bishops, but the many in the church, it'll be filled with those who accept compromise. And I always think when you hear that word compromise, what is it? It's dialogue with the devil. And what do they say when you dialogue with the devil? You're going to be outsmarted because he's a clever, clever being, regardless of the fact he's a fallen angel. He's still more intelligent than all of us. And you start dialoguing with the devil, you start compromising with little bits here, little bits there. As time goes on, you look back, I think that's when we could realize how desensitized we may have become, not just with about abortion, but spiritually speaking, what's accepted, what's tolerated, what are we silent about? And I think the church is far too silent on many factors these days. Too much dialogue with social justice and social working together type thing, establishments. And it's like, but where is the identity of the faith and God's will at the heart of it? And yeah, is it in Psalm 8 or one of the Psalms? Sorry, it's he knits us in our mother's womb. Before you were even created, I knew you through and through. It's like every human life is sacred, and every single person who's been willed deliberately by God Himself to be born to the people, regardless of the situation, those parents have been given that great life. And it might have been at times where things have come through unpleasantness. It might have came through unplanned pregnancies. It might have come through a whole different variety of reasons. But goodness will always come through. The light will always come through the darkness. And that's where we need to be back closer to God for that. And the reason I'm saying this is what you're saying there is like, this is definitely a spiritual battle, even for people of no faith. Just because they don't believe it doesn't mean it's not true. And we both mentioned before starting the recording that we're both interviewed like Zachary King. He's an ex-high wizard, Church of Satan, did the magic, over 100 and odd abortions he assisted in. And he's telling us, it says, abortion is the sacrament of the devil, if you could put it that way. It might be the security guard letting us in the evening with their own doctor and the woman, and we're doing our own rituals. It might be the doctor or the nurse themselves in the clinic that's part of the Satanic coven. I'm like, I'm listening to this and I'm like, I know the people out there practice Satanism or occultism, but when he's making it so clear, like these people are around us, you don't know who the next police officer is that's coming for that reason. You don't know the person working in that abortion clinic that you're praying outside. I mean, I'm not saying the women going in there are all for that, but people who are very devilish, deliberately worshipping the devil, Satanism, part of satanic covens like he's describing after being as high ranked as he was for many years. This is where they focus. And does that not tell you something?
Yeah, and I think obviously, like you say, we have to be careful not to kind of demonize any individual per se. But I think often Satan just uses people who are maybe quite weak, or there's so many people nowadays living not in a state of grace, and they're just very easy targets to become an instrument of Satan, maybe even unwittingly many times. Because Satan's powerhouse is the abortion center. You look at, like I said, that the one that we used to pray outside, 10,000 abortions a year were happening there. It's just mind-boggling the amount of evil that is happening there. Like you say, this is blood sacrifice that is kind of building up power for Satan. And I remember years ago reading a story by David B. Wright, one of the founders of 40 Days for Life, and I think it's really relevant here. I mean, I probably won't get it exactly right, but basically he shared how an abortion center, a big abortion center, closed down in America. And it was brought by a group who I think were turning it into some sort of prayer center or a crisis pregnancy center or something very Christian based. And so they asked different Christian leaders to come into the center to pray together. And he was one of those people. And they decided to sort of follow in the footsteps that the abortionist would have taken and pray at each of those stages. So starting at the front door, they prayed in the actual abortion room, and I remember them saying how there was a big sort of dip in the floor where the abortionist had stood because he'd performed so many abortions there, and so they really prayed heavily there. And then they went and stood at the exit doors. And he said, as they finished their final prayers, the doors swung open by themselves, these big metal doors. And this rush of wind left the room, and like a little breeze came back. And they all felt that this was sort of the Holy Spirit kind of coming back into this building again, and the evil had left. And he shared how he then went out onto the street as he left to go home. And a woman was walking down the street, and she came up to him and she said, have you just come out of that building? And he said, yes, that's right. And she said, can I just ask you something? She said, I walk past here a lot. And she said, I always notice that horrible gargoyle on the top of the building. And it's not here today. What's happened to it? Has something knocked it off? Well, of course, there had never been a gargoyle there. She was clearly seeing something that maybe others haven't seen, to kind of let us know that this is one of Satan's minions standing over his powerhouse. And I always think of the kind of parallel of that situation in a story when I read Saint Faustina's diary.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read her diary, there's a point where she gets on a train and goes on a long train journey, and she's looking out of the window, and God allows her to see that on the top of every church they pass, there's an angel standing over the top of that church guarding it. And it's almost like that's the opposite. That's God's powerhouses that are guarded by his angels. And we know that Satan likes to imitate and to mock. He's got his own powerhouse that he guards by his minions, and that is the abortion centers. So it kind of makes us to see the like you were sharing earlier, the spiritual element of this. That yes, we do need to think of we do need to talk to people in a reasonable way, and we do need to use rational arguments. We can't forget that at its heart, this is a spiritual issue, and we need to use spiritual weapons to target it. So, prayer obviously being the key one that we need to use, which is why that is being targeted, even silent prayer, because it is so powerful, particularly, I believe, when coupled with public witness, because, that is a really important thing nowadays. And to pray out in public and pray at the source of where that evil is, even if you're not witnessing to anyone, even if it's just an interior prayer, silently prayed, to pray at the source of that evil is so important, because that area needs to be sanctified, because otherwise that evil is going to spread, and it has done, and we can see the results of that.
Yeah, for sure. And the only last thing I say from the spiritual point, while it's still in my head, because Zachary, again, being so high ranked in the Church of Satan as a high wizard, speaking about all these abortions they all did for that satanic ritual stuff, he says the best way of battling it as well. Well, first of all, he said, I never knew anything about the Catholic faith. I never knew anything really with Christianity from a young age, because I was so involved from such a young age in the satanic covens and things like that. He says, but anytime something went wrong at the abortion clinic when they were meant to do the ritual, every time something went wrong, he realised people were outside mumbling the same stuff. And now he knows, years later after his conversion, he knows it was people praying the rosary outside. But he says the other thing to go super nuclear, supernaturally, so to speak, is to get the bishop of the diocese, because he's a successor of the apostles, the bishop of the diocese where that clinic is, to pray near the clinic with the people, having Holy Mass, adoration, walking around, to the Guadalupe image you mentioned as well as you did before. And I'm like, well, what are they trying to do now is the buffer zones? And it's like, again, this is the battle, isn't it? Back and forth. And it's like, how easy would that be? More likely, how difficult would that be, I would think. But although I think it would be very, very powerful. And it's just something that I remember him saying, because Our Lady of Guadalupe, as much as I'm aware of her, and you can do a big talk on her image, the miraculous image that NASA has put so much time and effort into investigating, which is phenomenal. The symbolism itself, when you have it all explained to you, but the fact that she's pregnant in it, and we're approaching the 500th anniversary in 2031. And I did an interview with a Dr. Peter Howard from America. He does the Fulton Sheen Institute. He's very big with seeing how Our Lady of Guadalupe fits in for now. And there's something like big coming. And also the Miraculous Medal in the same year of 2031 will be the 200th anniversary. And it all links to the Immaculate Conception. That's the video there for yourself and for others to watch, because it can easily fit in to see that spiritual battle again. The woman who crushes the serpent's head is literally the Aztec translation, the woman who crushes the serpent. And it goes back to Genesis 3:15, where it puts enmity between the woman and him, between her seed and his seed. And that seed has been the child. And we know it's Our Lady and Jesus, but it goes back to the fact why Satan hates women. He hates life, and they are the bearers of life. And that beautiful, precious gift of life that's way beyond our imagination or understanding is one thing to highlight now that we're turning it back then, Isabel, is the fact that these women that are going in there feeling ashamed, like for whatever reason, they think the only way to have the abortion, surely they're feeling worse after it. I mean, what would you say in your experience in terms of helping women that have had abortions, or like the demographic side of things, in terms of like what's the main reasons for it and what's the after help that's available? I mean, because I think the pro-lifers are the only one offering help afterwards. The clinic and the government, as far as I know, don't offer help because they're doing them a service as part of their rights. But who's looking after them where so many apparently regret it? I mean, have you got percentages or numbers, or in terms of the demographics of how the fact is that women deserve more?
Yeah, and I think, just to make sure I've mentioned that, I think for those who are hurting after an abortion, and that's whether it's women or men, and even if people have just been indirectly hurt, I just can't recommend enough Rachel's Vineyard, which helps all those who've been hurt by abortion. And that's an international movement. So there's many branches of that all around the world. And you're right. Often, if people are hurt by abortion, the last place they want to go back to is the abortion centre, which supposedly do some sort of post-abortion counselling. I can't imagine what that is. The problem is, if it's not done by the right people, it can actually confirm them in a state of denial, which is often what can happen after an abortion. Sometimes many women will say that immediately after an abortion, they actually felt relief. And that's actually that form of denial. And I sometimes like to give the parallel as if you imagine that somebody was suffering with postnatal depression, and in a fit of despair, they kind of smothered their child or did something terrible to their child. If at a later date they said, I can't believe what I've done, I wish I'd reached out for help, I can't believe I've lost my child through this and I killed them, you would at least think, okay, that they're in a sane mind now. Clearly what they did, that they were in turmoil at that time, not that that justifies it in any way, shape or form. But if they were actually saying, you know what, looking back, I'm really glad what I did. That child wasn't worth anything anyway. I don't even know whether it was a human being. You'd be thinking, gosh, this person is really confused, And that's what happens after an abortion. There's some people you meet and they will be saying, I'm fine. I haven't got any problems after an abortion. And people can think, oh, so does abortion sometimes not affect women? No, those are the women that actually are even more affected, because if they don't realize that they've taken the life of their own child and that was a seriously wrong thing to do, then they're actually in denial of reality. And clearly from a mental health perspective, that can't be good. We've got to live in the real world to kind of, in a holistic way, to be healthy, because this is where we live. We've got to be in touch with it. And I think this is one of the jobs of the job of us as people who are pro-life, people who are Christian, people who are Catholic, to help people to become in touch with reality. So that is the physical world, and of course the spiritual world as well, as it is, as it truly is. So obviously, before an abortion, we need to help people recognize the truth of what it means to be pregnant. And I think this is kind of like the kind of elephant in the room question that often doesn't really get addressed. People say, oh, anyone who has an abortion thinks long and hard about their decision. They might be thinking long and hard about, do I want to be pregnant? But they're not actually thinking, what is pregnancy? And actually really focusing on the humanity of that child and recognizing that abortion will intentionally end that child's life. It will kill it. That's not something that they're encouraged to actually think about. And if they do, that's often what changes somebody's mind, when they actually focus on that. But for all the thinking that often goes on, from the women I've spoken to, it's almost just like they were thinking, I want to be unpregnant. That's the word that so many women have used to me who've had abortions. I was just wanting to be unpregnant. I just didn't want to be pregnant anymore. Not what actually is pregnancy. There's a certain disconnect that we've kind of fostered in our society, which enables us to think of pregnancy without actually thinking of the human being that's inside that woman. So I think that's part of the result of having over 50 years of legalized abortion. Even those of us with really open hearts to the truth, our hearts don't hurt as they should to this issue. If we really recognize that 250,000 around a year in our own country, children are aborted, we would be left devastated by this. But as I say, it's we know it on an intellectual level, some of us, but not really in our hearts. And that's because we've all become desensitized in many ways to it, and it's our job as Christians to help resensitize people to this issue, so that we can really recognize the truth of what's happening and really target that.
Yeah.
And I just want to just quickly pick up on something that you were mentioning, Mark, because it's just something that's just come to me recently that I think we really need to maybe mention more. You were talking about just like the beauty of motherhood and Satan really attacking that, particularly attacking women because of the beauty of motherhood. And I seem to meet, a lot of, particularly amongst the Catholic community, amongst other Christians as well, a lot of women who would like to be mothers in a physical sense and can't for whatever reason. I meet many women who are maybe not in relationships but would like to be, who would love to be married and for whatever reason aren't. Maybe they couldn't find a suitable spouse, or even people who are married who for whatever reason children aren't coming their way, and that's a real source of heartbreak to them. And there seems to be a lot of women who I know who are in this category. And I think it's no coincidence that it's at the same time as we've got so many women who are physically mothers, who are denying their own motherhood and trying to turn their backs on it. And I think those of us who are aware of what's going on spiritually, I think it's important for those women to recognize that we are all spiritually mothers. That is something that God calls every woman to embrace, whether you ever physically become a mother or not, or whether you adoptively become a mother or not. from a spiritual perspective, we're all called to be mothers to other people. And I think once we recognise that the real spirit of motherhood, which is a spirit of sacrifice, which is a spirit of selflessness, which is a spirit of nurturing the good in others, then I think that can help actually target what part of the problem is, this lack of motherhood, because often that can come from people not wanting to take up a certain sacrifice, maybe people not wanting to change a lifestyle, or recognizing that there can be difficulties with having a child or another child. I mean, sometimes people will have this phrase of we should tell women that they can have it all, they can have their career and they can have children, and and I'm not saying there's not some truth in that, but I think we need to kind of be careful that we're not saying that there isn't also an element of sacrifice, because children and families do require some sacrifice. Sometimes you do have to give up something else, and that can be really hard, and I don't think we should deny that you can't always have everything that you want in life, but that the joy of a child and that value of every child's life is worth whatever sacrifice that we give. I know many a time I've been outside the abortion centre and women have said to me, "You care about my child more than I do." And there's probably some truth in that. But I think that's what we as Christians, and particularly as Catholics, are called to do, to care about other people's children and other people who are maybe struggling to recognise either the gift of life within them or the gift of their own life. And there's a lot of women who really struggle to recognise that, maybe because of their upbringing and because of either lack of faith or broken families. They don't recognise how valuable they are. And I think to kind of foster that spirit of spiritual motherhood is really important for women to do nowadays.
Absolutely. And with that being said, with them, I mean, for the few minutes that we have left, I'm just thinking, what else can we do to show? I mean, we can pray in the safety of our house, we can pray outside as a witness, like you've done, and take the consequences as they come. But what would you say is like the role of even the men are? Because for me, when they're getting to that clinic to have the abortion, I know everyone has different circumstances, but Lucia Fatima said that the last decisive battle between Jesus and his church and the Antichrist and the false church would be over marriage and family. And I think, especially since the swinging 60s to now, the morals have been decaying and degrading. We're seeing divorce rates so much. We're seeing annulments all the time because of marriage preparation wasn't done in the right way. Everything there, and plus all the new rights that's coming in today with the alphabet communities, it's like the identity crisis now, and all of everything results in the fact that you can really see this big attack. I mean, I know the obvious answer is to live the messages our Blessed Mother gives, live the gospel, know your faith, and live it well. But what else is there for maybe like the man side now that you've mentioned the women?
Yeah, and I think it's really important. We've talked about sometimes, what isn't happening that should be happening. Maybe even in the church. Although I do say we do need to recognise that there are many very good priests and very good bishops. I mean, we've got 5 of them coming to the March for Life this year, which is fantastic. So we need to encourage those that are being such great witnesses to the rest of us. But sometimes when we look at the church, we can think, what the church isn't doing. We are the church as well. It's not just the clergy, it's the lay people as well. And like you say, that very much includes men. And I think sometimes that kind of frustration can come about when we're looking at what other people aren't doing. When we recognise that the only thing that we are responsible for ultimately is ourselves and what we are or aren't doing, then it becomes a little bit more of a manageable problem, and I think, like you say, men very much need to get involved in this issue with pro-life. That's why the other side is so passionately saying it's not a man's issue, men, you stay out of it, no uterus, no opinion, and all these crazy slogans, because we know where that their argument is coming from. Ultimately, it's coming from Satan, the father of lies, and he knows that strong men are very much needed today. Men have a very unique role of leadership and of authority. I'm not saying, of course, that women can't in various ways be leaders and have a certain amount of authority in different ways, but there's a very unique role that men have, and it can be absolutely transformative when pro-life men get involved. I know with the 40 Days for Life that I run in Birmingham, we've had more women change their minds about abortion and decide to continue their pregnancy and feel supported after speaking with men than after speaking with women. And that's not to downplay women's roles, of course. Like I've just said, pro-life women are very much needed. But sometimes men will say to me things like, well, if I'm going outside the abortion centre, can you make sure there's a woman there with me? And I'm like, absolutely no. Because many of these women have been let down by men. That is the problem in their lives. They've had men that are using them, men that are pushing them, men that have just been silent and said, the responsibility is yours, when it was never supposed to be borne by just one person. So to have a man actually there saying, you know what, I care about you, not because I want something back, not because I'm trying to use you, not because I'm trying to manipulate you. I just care about you, and I want to help you. And how can I do that? Like I say, that is transformative for women. So we need more pro-life men recognizing the power that they do have in a real sense, not in a dominating women sense, but in trying to affirm women in their real identity, as mothers in whatever way that might be. Like I say, whether that's in biological mothers or in a spiritual way. And like I say, often men have been the problem, in letting women down. And we do find that often in nature that I think, when you've got something like that, it's actually the problem that is also the cure. Like if someone's bitten by a snake, then it's actually where you get the antivenom from is the snake. You need to go back to that. If you ever stung by a stinging nettle, you can actually break the stinging nettle, and there's that juice inside, which is actually really quite healing to put on afterwards. The men that have caused so many problems today by being weak, by not standing up as they should, then we need to recognize that is where the cure is. Also in good, strong men stepping out as leaders and being man enough to sometimes take what, the kind of abuse that can sometimes come at them. I've seen men having to have people shout at them, say really unpleasant things to them when they are witnessing for good, whether that's in rosaries in the cities, or like you say, praying outside abortion centres, or standing up for life in various ways and standing up for their faith. Yes, they might have to take the brunt of it, but sometimes if they can be strong enough to almost be a bit of a sounding board for somebody's anger, you can realize that behind that there's a lot of brokenness, there's a lot of hurt, and they need to maybe just be able to kind of accept that to start with, so that we can actually get to the source of what that problem is, and the woundedness that there is in society. So I think the important thing I would want people to kind of take away is to recognize whatever their own small role is. Don't feel frustrated that you can't solve the world's problems on abortion. That's not your job. Your job is to reach out to that one person who might be in your life. And it might not necessarily be somebody in a crisis pregnancy situation. It might just be somebody who's a bit confused on this issue. Whatever that situation is, we can all do something. We can learn how to have more productive conversations on this. We can come to the March for Life on the 7th of September in London, and be part of that big witness. Just those little actions in stepping out, that's when we begin to change the culture, and we can all do something with that.
Yeah, you just brought up a memory for me there, Isabel, because the one and only time I've ever prayed outside an abortion clinic, it wasn't planned. I actually went down to Canning Town in London a couple of times, and one time was, well, they were both with the Friars of the Renewal, who are a big witness with pro-life, and they were going with a church nearby into some part of the city, and with me being there, obviously I go along. And you'd never know it was an abortion clinic. It looked kind of like those houses like Downing Street in a way, the private estate areas, and cobbled roads, I think it was. So we arrived and we're just silently praying with many others. We did a little procession from the church to there. It wasn't too far away actually, and we had a couple of police officers escorting us. We must have been there a good hour. No one's coming, no one's in or out. But then a young lady did leave. She's lucky if she looked as if she was 25 at her age, if that, and she was there herself. And as soon as she stepped out the door, she was obviously in before we arrived, but as she stepped out and she just saw us silently praying across the road, she just burst into tears and she walked on away. But again, someone goes with her and says, here's the leaflet, here's the contact. If you need support, we're here for you. We're not going out there banishing them. We're not going out there making them feel ashamed. She's been left on her own now. The deed's been done. The government's done their part. She's left with her regret. She's left with her tears. She's left with the shame or whatever else it might have been that triggered such a reaction of crying. And that we were there for that support. But the way I felt, we see another couple coming half an hour later. You could tell the way they were dressed, the way they looked. They had money. They looked very well to do. And the man and woman go in, but he comes out 5 minutes later, walks on the mobile phone. And I just remember in my stomach, I felt the tense knots. It's like the helplessness knowing what's happening in there and you can't do nothing about it. But as a young man, I was like, what's this man doing? You know, like you were saying, where's that role? It's like we're supposed to be protectors. We're supposed to be there to love and protect, to cherish, and all these words where I remember the vows at the wedding and things. It's like, but the role of a man, and to me, without sounding as if I'm judging him, but poor excuse of a man is what I felt at a young age. I must have only been 21 at the time. And I'm like, that's not the role of a man. And the role, why am I feeling the knots and he's walking away not caring less? You don't know where everyone is individually at that time. But we never had any abuse, and to be honest with you, I don't know how well I could stand to take the abuse. But you're braver than me for that part, I would say. I'd want to be there to help in that. But if people are spitting on me, I think I used to say years ago that spitting is worse than a punch. There's something vulgar about it. Yeah, it's coming from a place of brokenness, and that's where our faith really rises up and where we need to rise to the challenge of the faith, so to say. But you did mention about the March for Life, and I would just like maybe to finish with the opportunity then, if people want to get involved, if you can give us the details about that, how to get in contact, where to go, and anything else you'd like to promote.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's on the 7th of September in London. So you can go to the website, which is marchforlife.co.uk, and March for Life is all words. And that will have all the information on it. We've got in the morning, we've got a pro-life health summit at the Emmanuel Centre, which is from 10:30 to 12:30. So there'll be lots of medical professionals speaking into this issue. There'll be interviews with people who are ex-abortion workers. There's a Q&A panel. So there's lots of stuff going on there, as well as all the different pro-life stalls that showcase their work. So if you're somebody who's thinking, maybe I would like to actually get, more involved in something pro-life and actually start to do something, that's a great place to go, because you can see all the different organizations and the different works that they do, as well as having a whole big hall for all the children who come along, different ages. So there's different age groups, right from the tiniest little ones right up until 18. There's different sections with different activities that are suitable for everybody to come along to. And then the actual march itself starts from the Emmanuel Centre at 1:30, where we march to Parliament Square and have all our keynote speeches there. And our theme for this year is abortion isn't healthcare. So, people are sometimes even making their own posters and things to bring along based on that theme. We really encourage you to come along. There's thousands that do. We used to kind of almost have to push the young people to the front for photos. Now it is just teeming with young people, with families. It is just a wonderful event to come to. Like I mentioned, we've got 5 Catholic bishops who are coming, along with various other Christian leaders of different denominations, and many, many clergy. So I think it's a time to kind of maybe celebrate those who are within the church who do witness to life and who are bold and courageous. And I feel I should just say at the end, by the way, that although we've touched upon how difficult it can sometimes be when you're witnessing for life, and yes, you have to be prepared to sometimes have somebody insult you or say something unpleasant, there is so much joy as well. The amount of occasions I've had, with sometimes just people walking past who've stopped and just been so grateful to be able to talk to somebody about this issue. But of course, the times when somebody does decide that they want to continue a pregnancy, we think that it can be such a difficult thing to help somebody continue a pregnancy, and that there are times when it's taken an awful lot. There's such complicated situations that we've had to help with. But a situation that just comes to mind, Mark, is like I remember being outside the abortion centre, and a young man came out. He was obviously the boyfriend, and he was just saying, "Oh, can you just tell me where the nearest shops are?" So we told him where they were, and I said, "Oh, have you got somebody in the abortion centre?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's my girlfriend." And I said, "Well, is there any help we can offer you?" And he said, "No." He said, "Because I'm actually with you guys." He said, I don't support abortion, but I don't want to lose my girlfriend, and I know this is what she wants, so I'd rather just go along with it because I don't want to lose her as well." So we said, "Look, we've got some leaflets of help. Would you consider giving one to your girlfriend and asking her to come out and talk to us?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go to the shops, but I'll talk to you on my way back." And off he went. As he left, a young woman came out of the abortion centre and comes up to us and goes, "I'm wondering if you've seen my boyfriend. He just came out a few minutes ago." And I said, "Well, I think so. I think he's the guy who's just gone to the shops." And he said, "He'll be back in a minute." And I said, "In the meantime, can we offer you any help?" She said, "Well, not really, because I already agree with you. I don't agree with abortion. I want to keep the baby, but I don't want to lose my boyfriend. And I know this isn't what he wants." And of course, this guy comes back and I'm like, "You two have got to talk to each other and tell each other what you have both just told me." And they kind of really sheepishly began to kind of open up to each other. And that joy, as they physically kind of embraced, they couldn't believe what they had so nearly done through lack of communication. So on that occasion, all we needed to say was like, "You two talk to each other." Sometimes it's something as simple as that, as well as, the many times that people have come out and said, "I can just feel that you're praying for me and it's changed my mind." So sometimes it's so little that it takes of us, but it just maybe takes that step of being prepared to kind of, accept whatever comes our way and the challenges. But that witness being there can have just such tremendous effects, that the joy when you're part of that, it's worth it all. It really is. So I would hate anyone to be put off just because of the challenges. That's Christian life. You're never going to get anything if you're not prepared to kind of put up with that. And the joy we experience when we do have those wonderful situations is just incredible.
That's a good note to finish on. And I dare say they're happy now with their little kid, maybe even one more or two, you never know. But I guarantee you they're not regretting it, having
Yeah.
that child. And I remember a few times over the years, like young relatives of that be getting pregnant young and the worry and the parents are like, "Oh, all this." See, as soon as the baby comes, that's it. It's all Gucci goos and and you're just acting so silly for a smile. Everything changes when that baby comes. And one thing I always say to people as well, if you've been born like from the 70s, certainly the 80s onwards, is we all had the yes from our mothers when they could have said no. And whether you're pro-life, pro-abortion, pro-choice, which probably leans that way anyway, just remember your mother said yes to you. And that's something we need to cherish as well. But Isabel, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could speak to you for another hour, but I know we've both got work to go to and we've got other appointments and things going on. Maybe after the March for Life, you can come on and give us an update or anything in the future. You'll always have the support here, and hopefully that's the end to all the legal battles as well. And nothing further's coming, but we do need to keep praying hard and fighting the fight for whatever else they're going to try and bring out now to keep that battle going. But we're on the right side. We're with God, who can stand against us. So I'd just like to say to everyone, remember, if you want to join the big march, it's well organised. There's going to be thousands of people there as always. Marchforlife.co.uk to get all the information about September 7th march. And all other information will be there. And please spread the video as always. Cast those nets out there to see how many people we can reach and who needs to hear this. And always give the thumbs up, like, subscribe. It helps the algorithm promote it all the more to people, and that's what it's all about. And until next time, take care and God bless.